now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, because we're having us a barbecue. One of my Facebook friends gave me some information regarding how Mindy Wheeler, a comic book creator, was treated poorly by members of comic social media.
Hey everyone, today I'm diving into the story of the Wheelers, some of the most controversial creators in the comic book world. Buckle up, it's a wild ride. In 2015, the Wheelers burst onto the scene but were soon ostracized by the mainstream comic industry. Why? They didn't play by the rules. They challenged the status quo, were politically incorrect, and pushed for creative independence and quality, something the industry wasn't ready for. When they tried to launch a convention empowering indie creators, Rob Liefeld threw them under the bus and lied about them, sparking rumors that would last over a decade. As the industry and comic news outlets turned against them, their reputation took a major hit. In 2018, things got messier with Comicsgate. Mindy Wheeler briefly engaged with the movement. But after a clash with EVS, the Wheelers became deeply disliked within Comicsgate. Trolls exaggerated the events, but the Wheelers stood their ground, telling the truth. Known for their no-holds-barred approach, they made enemies everywhere. Lied about and dismissed, they learned not to trust high-profile creators or YouTubers. Still passionate about supporting indie comics, they returned in 2020 to launch a free speech crowdfunding platform. It was quickly trolled out of existence by indie comics groups influenced by malicious rumors. Other creators claimed it was impossible for the Wheelers to have received support from fans and called them scammers. But they were very wrong. This experience taught the Wheelers that hostility in comics came from creators, not fans. While others focused on drama, they decided to pour their energy into creating their first comic book. They took everything bad that happened to them and turned it into something positive, something which made them laugh. In 2023, they hit back hard with a comic called Boobs Number 1. Despite the backlash from the cries of their haters, it was a massive success. Why? Because it was bold, unapologetic, and struck a chord with readers sick of the same old, same old. The Wheelers didn't just create comics, they exposed industry flaws and lampooned other creators relentlessly. They didn't align with any group. If something was wrong, they called it out. Their commitment to consumers and quality earned them a loyal fan base, even if it meant being hated by the industry. In the end, love them or hate them, the Wheelers have left an indelible mark on the indie scene and the comic world. Thanks to the Wheelers, we have been able to see what's really behind the curtain. They've exposed issues like Coffin Comics' litigious practice, and critiqued the ethical practices of industry players, including Ethan Van Sciver's questionable sourcing of his company logo, successful indie companies sweeping issues under the rug, creators tracing other creators, the misuse of celebrity likeness rights, showrunners maliciously interfering with business contracts, industry veterans not delivering on crowdfunding campaigns, creators mistreating customers, the potential use of AI in comic art, and plenty more. It's easy to see why they're so hated and receive harsh backlash, especially from those they critique. Continuing to prioritize the consumer's experience, they've spoken up about market manipulation and deceptive practices. They've given opportunities to deserving artists and proved that shaking things up can drive real change. With their success, the Wheelers showed that fans matter most. No creator is above scrutiny. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, hit that like.
And the information he gave me basically shows me that what I learned way back in 2019, that many of the people on comic social media are not really genuine about looking to try to save the comic book business, but they are opportunists looking to get into their people to go out here and buy into their con as related to the comic book industry. Now, when it comes to the whole market of independent crowdfunded comics, there are people who are passionate about comics who want to publish great books, and those companies out there are ones I want to go out here and support. However, I don't want to support those individuals who go out here and use social media to promote a con game on comic fans and promote a con game on comics fans where they look to grift money out of people's pockets and get them to buy into their rhetoric and not really go out here and provide people with quality comics or try to go out here and help out the business of comics overall. Now, what my Facebook friend showed me as related to the way comic artist Mindy Wheeler was treated shows me that there are some out here on comic social media who are not really genuine about looking to save the medium of American comics, and there were efforts to again keep Mindy Wheeler from being able to compete that show me that there are those in the comic book industry who are working against creators out here and working against creators in order to go out here and look to be gatekeepers as related to keeping people out of the comic book business, and two, people looking to get people not to buy comics but to buy into the con that they're trying to pull as related to the comic book business. Now, ever since about 2015, when Marvel Comics launched its all-new, all-different Marvel, this is where people on comics social media began looking to promote independent crowdfunded comics as an alternative to many of what they called the so-called woke comics being written by inexperienced individuals in order to participate in a political agenda of social justice and identity politics. And these individuals say that they want to go out here and promote their comics as a alternative to these so-called social justice woke comics written by these inexperienced individuals, and that this alternative would be better than the comics that are being produced at companies like Marvel, DC, Image, Dynamite, and many others. However, over the last couple of years, we see that many of these independent comics, which started out making big money, such as Richard C. Myers' Jawbreakers, Lost Souls, Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog, and even Young Ripa's Ripaverse, many of these books, again, got a lot of fanfare and a lot of big numbers. Unfortunately, the comic book industry did not expand as these individuals speculated it would from these independent comics. No, what has happened is the whole overall industry has further contracted, and it's further contracted to the point where there are only about 300 comic book stores here in the United States, down from the 10,000 stores that were around in the 1990s, and the number continues to shrink with each passing year. And these individuals continue to go out here and sell people on this whole idea that they are going to go out here and provide an alternative to these so-called bad comics that are so-called woke and filled with social justice. However, it doesn't seem like people are buying into this con, except for those desperate comic fans who bought into this idea, and bought into this idea because they bought into the rhetoric from these individuals on comic social media. These individuals on comic social media who basically complained that these comics, again from Marvel and DC, are so bad, and look to sell you on their alternative. And as they look to sell you on their alternative, what they really aren't selling you is a comic, but what they want to do is sell you a narrative. And as they sell you a narrative as related to providing their alternative, what these individuals do is go out here and basically con the audience two ways. They con the audience on social media, basically to get clicks and views, to get AdSense dollars for their channels, and build their base of subs. And as they're building their base of subs, what they do is again get money from the social media, from the AdSense dollars. Moreover, they possibly get money from donations on Super Chats and donations from PayPal and Cash App, and that's how they make a good chunk of their money that they make on the front side of the business while selling you a crowdfunding project for a comic, and get you, after you've gone out here and bought into their rhetoric, to go buy their comic. And in these days, they're not basically even delivering on these comics. No, what the grifters have been doing is basically telling people, oh, the comic industry is going to be making these bad comics. Go buy my alternative. And as you buy their alternative, what you do is again buy into the rhetoric by giving these guys money on the front end with Super Chats, PayPal, and Cash App donations, and then on the back end buy the comic. And then as you buy the comic, this is where many of the same individuals who bought into this rhetoric basically get burned, because what happens is that many of these grifters never deliver on that comic. No, they never deliver on the comic, but sadly the mark never sees how they got conned from minute one, and how many of these individuals were never genuine about making any sort of comic. Yes, they'll sit there and talk about how they make a comic and how will possibly make the first one, but when it comes down to making the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, we get excuses about delays. We get excuses about, oh, the book is coming, but the book never comes. And I know for a fact I've dealt with a couple of Kickstarters where I put money into books and never got a book. And it's really frustrating because it shows me how a lot of people in the American comic book business really are not about the business of selling comics. No, it's all about the con, and it's all about selling you about an idea. The idea that these individuals want you to buy into is the covert contract that they are going to be the savior of the comic book industry, and that their book is going to save the business. However, when we look at the numbers for many of these comics don't even do sales at any level. I mean, you might have the highest, which is the Rippaverse, which may make 15,000 a book, which is basically nothing when you consider that the nation is 330 million people. 15,000 is nothing, and many others will do maybe 500 to 1,000, and that's not enough to really have an impact on the overall publishing business, but it has an impact on the bottom line of many of these indie creators who go out here and again make big profits by exploiting their audience as related to this con that they are going to again go out here and revitalize the comic book industry, an industry that basically at this point is gone in a further state of decline from the prime days of Comicsgate, because in the prime days of Comicsgate back in 2019, guys like Ethan Van Sciver were pulling millions of dollars, and many others, guys like Richard C. Meyer, were pulling hundreds of thousands of dollars. But here we are in 2024, almost about 6-7 years later, and many of these crowdfunding projects, again, don't really pull that kind of money anymore. I mean, it's gotten to the point where when I go over to places like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, I don't really see much as related to diversity of thought, as related to independent comics. No, these days, mostly what I see on Kickstarter are mostly NSFW or X-rated comics with a lot of nudity and adult content. That's primarily what's getting funded these days. And over on, again, Indiegogo, it's about the same thing. Again, mostly adult content, and most of the regular content is no longer on these platforms anymore. So I'm not seeing where these independent creators are having the impact on the industry. I'm not seeing where they're getting the numbers that would again get the attention of many of these bigger licensing businesses, like the people who make action figures, or the people who go out here and make merchandising, or the people who go out here and make properties like animated series. I mean, I don't see the business impact, but these guys will have it in their minds as related to the delusion they want to sell you, that they're going to again go out here and revive the comic book industry, when the comic book industry in America in and of itself has been on a steady decline, from the days of 2011, when I wrote an ebook called An Analysis of the Comic Book Industry's Business Issues, where I stated that the median age of a comic book reader was 35 years old back then, and here in 2024, the median age of a comic book reader is 50 years old, and the customers who shop at many of these independent crowdfunding projects are usually older people. They're usually older people who grew up with comics, and not many of the younger readers that the industry desperately needs. No, we're not seeing many of the younger customers as related to the median age dropping on these books to the point of where it is with manga. I mean, manga's median age is where it was for comics in 1987, and even younger than that, because I believe that the median age for manga might be anywhere from 8 to 12 years old. So manga's audience continues to get younger, but comics continues to get older, even in the face of Comicsgate. And sadly, Comicsgate basically did nothing but make the situation worse. Many of the independent books really were not geared towards that PG-13 family-friendly audience the industry desperately needed. No, many of the comics produced basically today, I buy a lot of them, and a lot of them have so much graphic and adult content. Again, it's hard to say I can share those with kids, but a lot of the books, again, are basically for older audiences. So when I listen to these guys talk about how they're going to revolutionize the comic book industry, it's just one big con, and it's one big con that people buy into, because a lot of us are desperate. We want to see this industry come back. We want to see this industry get better. We want to see this industry reach a new generation. But sadly, that train basically passed in the 1990s. I remember reading a parody in a comic called What the from Marvel, where they showed Mistress Death with Mario from Mario Brothers, and she says that he's killing the comic book industry already. And basically, ironically, that's what's true. Back in the 1990s, the comic book industry was killed by the video game, because millennials got more interested in playing video games as they became much more complex. I remember a lot of my own cousin getting into games like Sonic and Madden and Mortal Kombat, and was more interested in those than he was into my comics. I mean, he would read my milestones, he would read my DCs and my Marvels. I would let him read my stuff, but he was more interested in the video games. And again, when more complex games like Tomb Raider hit the scene, and when PS2 hit the scene in 2000, it was basically game over for the comic book industry, which was already in a bad place due to the bankruptcy of Marvel Comics. And Dan Didio on the horizon basically took out DC, and this basically was the end game for the comic book industry. But the grifters won't tell you this. No, the grifters go out here and buy into the optimism of people like myself, who thought that, the comic book industry would have had a chance, but they have no chance at this point, because again, you only have 300 stores in the entire U.S., and stores continue to close in the aftermath of the pandemic. You still have stores closing in the aftermath of the pandemic, and with these stores closing, the industry in and of itself doesn't have an infrastructure to sell product, because if you talk to most comic shop owners, they'll tell you what they sell these days mostly are action figures, mostly are manga, and mostly are merchandise from anime and other types of shows. They basically are a merchandise store, and they have very few comics. I mean, American comics basically are gone at this point, and most people they're these days are either, if they are looking at any sort of comic book medium, it's either European comics which are exceptionally well done, or they are looking at manga, which is made in Korea and Japan. So they're not really looking at comics. And again, the American comic grifters won't talk about this. No, the grifters want to keep you buying into their rhetoric. They want to keep you buying into their rhetoric because that'll allow them to get clicks and views as you get outraged over whatever story that they're presenting about comics. And whatever story they're presenting about comics is again to get you emotional so that you will go out here making those clicks to watch their videos and give them money, or go to their live streams to give them your money in super chats or cash apps or whatever, or to go out here and buy into the latest crowdfunded project that you may not get in the mail. And sadly, what's going on behind the scenes is that as this grift is going on, lots of comic creators are basically being pushed out of the business, like they did supposedly as related to the report the viewer gave me about Mindy Wheeler, basically being pushed out of the business by so-called comic professionals who basically want to rule a fiefdom, where they basically want to be able to, again, rule over the ashes and ruins of the comic book industry, and don't want to go out here and compete with independent creators like myself, a guy who people knew about for years and basically ignored, because I've heard people knew about me as far back as 2012, but never got any sort of contact. They said they were contacting all these so-called Tumblr writers and people off Twitter. Well, I had been on social media since about 2009 with the Sean James Black Freelancer blog and been putting up sample chapters of my work, but never heard a word from these people. And that basically proves the point that the viewer wanted to show me, that, you know, the comic book industry isn't about going out here and putting the best comics or good creators in the marketplace. It's all about guys creating a covert contract with the audience, trying to make themselves into the savior of the industry, but are only sinking it further because as someone with publishing experience, I can tell you that you can't save the comic book industry with a giant size X-Men #1. No, that's never how it was ever done. No, when it came to comics, basically it was books basically taking years to build an audience. It usually took anywhere from 12 to 16 months for a book to build an audience and its momentum. It took a book years to, again, build up that goodwill with the readers. It took years of time to get the readers interested. And sadly, this is what many people in comics don't understand, because a lot of people got caught up in the hype of Image Comics. And as they got caught up in the hype of Image Comics and these books selling 1 million because of the names of guys like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane, they think, oh, I'm going to have an instant hit. No, that's never how it's ever been in the publishing business. No, it may take a year to a year and a half for people to discover a book. It may take several years for a reader to discover a book and find out how great it is. And sadly, no one in the comic book industry understands this, and they're trying to be this savior and put on this cape. But sadly, behind these so-called saviors are a lot of villains who basically want to sell you on their whole rhetoric and get you to buy into their rhetoric regarding being the one who's going to make the books that save the industry. But when you look critically at the business, you don't really see the sales numbers. No, you don't see the sales numbers as related to these books catching on. Moreover, you don't see many of these so-called independent publishers creating the infrastructure to consistently produce work out here. The only one that I see producing work consistently was Bad Bug Publications. And Bad Bug, basically, they have been putting out books on a more frequent pace because they really care about comics over there. I can say that about Bad Bug. There's really been a lot of good, solid work over there that makes them appear to be, to me, a legitimate company that really cares about comics. Now, their comics are a little bit more adult themed, but the whole thing is they put out stuff on a more frequent basis. And at one time, Concrete was putting out stuff on a frequent basis, but they just basically stopped at this point. But the whole thing is, when it comes to these whole comic crowdfunders, a lot of it is turning into a big grift. And again, a big grift where people are looking to get big money, even with platforms like Indiegogo and Kickstarter. Again, people not focused on comics, but more focused on back and forths with most of the comic social media, hoping to, again, ironically participate in the same behavior that they complained that the social justice types participated in. Now, back in 2018, a lot of people complained that the social justice types were spending so much time on social media instead of promoting their work. And what's really ironic is many of those comics YouTubers are now spending more time on social media than working on their comics, and they're spending no time going out here to promote their work, similar to what I do every day, whether it be on social media with the ads in front of my videos or the content that I go out here and promote on social media platforms. I always make an effort to go out here and promote work regularly, because the only way people are going to know about books is through word of mouth. And a lot of the word of mouth, as related to many of these indie crowdfunding comics, a lot of it isn't really good, especially for the popular YouTubers. They spend so much time, again, going into back and forth, but you don't see it on their page. And that's where the con falls apart as related to things, because once they get their money and give you a bad book, they basically give you poor quality, and even worse, basically swerve a lot of people behind the scenes. And again, shows me how the comic book industry has gone and become one big con that's not about producing quality comics. And because they're not about producing quality comics, what's happening is the entire industry basically has further sunk since 2018, and sunk to the point where we might not ever see another American comic that comes out of top quality from anybody at this point, outside of a few companies here and there. I mean, the whole thing is that everybody's all about raking in AdSense dollars on the front end and crowdfunding dollars on the back end, and then try to go out here and make it like they're going to be a savior when they're not interested in saving anyone. No, they're not interested in saving this business, and that's why this business is suffering. It's suffering because a lot of people basically, again, they're not about making good comics or helping out the business. They're just about helping themselves to everybody's dollars, and helping everybody's dollars as related to this con about comics. A con about comics that has been, again, damaged this business because a lot of people haven't opened their eyes to see the pattern regarding many of these grifters, these social media grifters, who remind me a lot of many other guys like the gender war types. Again, this is the same type of thing where they, again, go out here and talk bad about one thing, then present themselves as the savior with the solution, but they really aren't interested in a solution. They just want to sell you on a problem and cash in as you buy into their ideas and their so-called comic, which is not about a solution, but about keeping you invested in the problem. And as you continue to be invested in the problem, you're not seeing how you're the one being conned as related to the whole comic book grift. Now, my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, which I did back in 2022, is available up on Lulu.com, and you can pick that book up for the same price it was in the 2022 Kickstarter in paperback. And my first digital comic, Esteem No Good Deed, which I did back in 2021, is available on Kindle for 99 cents. And you can get that book, and you can also get it in paperback, and the Esteem series book, Esteem Blast from the Past, on Amazon.com. And you can pick up all of the books on the SJS Direct Universe, which have been produced consistently since 2011. And you can find those books in the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, my vampire novel Eternal Night, and my sorority novel The Thetas and a Recipe for Success, the books that comprise the SJS Direct Universe. You can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me be able to make more videos talking about the comic book industry and the comic book business and publishing, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available on Lulu, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at lulu.com today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, Amari's Revenge. The goddess next door is confronted by a Nubian queen out for revenge at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in this inaugural ISIS series adventure. Get your copy of ISIS Amari's Revenge in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.